This is the Voice of Bold Business Radio. I am your host, Jess Dewell. This is program 161, Bring Your Values to Life and Work. So the setup for this today is a little different. I've been preparing a new talk that I actually gave yesterday. I wanted to share some of the information with you, the setup, what goes behind the scenes before a talk is given, for two reasons. One, the research is really fascinating. Two, I love to go deeper. And when you have 30 minutes or 90 minutes, it's typically never enough. So let's dig in a little bit more. You're in the right place for conversations about current problems and needs that we face as business leaders. You will hear today and in other Voice of Bold Business programs, conversations and interviews about what it means to develop culture and build tenacity within our organizations. And today, that focus is turned inward. Somewhat of a reflection, somewhat of an exploration, and definitely some thinking are woven in. We'll be back right after this.
Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business, the show that provides everything smart leaders need to evaluate situations, build relationships, and create solutions. Jessica Dewell candidly talks about the skills necessary to build tenacity and do more with less. And now, here's Jessica.
So I was asked recently to talk about the idea of values and why we think what we think, the reasons that we think, and the power of our thoughts. And so when I joined Greg Petrie's stage at his program yesterday, it really made me think, what did I want to do different? What did I want to bring to this power of thought conversation that maybe people have heard before, yet they hadn't thought about it in the same way? And you guys all know me. You all know that I will boldly speak up, that I will bring in not only my own personal values, but the values that we've based Red Direction on and the work that we're doing every single day to deliver a specific quality, a specific resourcefulness, a specific strength, being an advocate for what a company stands for, being an advocate for the hard journey that we're on as business leaders, executives, teams, that especially whether we're on the front line, whether we're in the middle somewhere, whether we're at the top someplace, our energy and our focus and our attention is stretched so thin. And this concept of bringing your values to life, something that I learned to put myself last, always. And my needs come after everybody else is taken care of at work, at Girl Scouts, at home, at wherever I happen to be. Okay, somebody wants something, they tell me they want something, I will do my best to make it happen. Whether that's support, giving time, giving energy, being present, helping participate in some project, getting them to where they want to go. I'm all for that. The thing is, it is one of my values, and I value being supportive, and I value being upfront. That also, I value being able to create. And more than create, I value being able to think, because when I can think, it ensures that my curiosity stays stoked, stays excited and ignited, and the fact that I would like to learn more when I have the time to think, when I have time to look at the information that has been shared with me, that I've read, that I've listened to in conversations, from the grocery store line to sitting around a boardroom. Bringing those together, looking at specific types of context, all are something that I enjoy and that I love. When I put everything except for myself first, not only am I not valuing my desire for learning and curiosity and being able to keep that going, I'm also removing the ability, because I am shortening my attention span across so many things, that it shows up in other parts of my life. I fight more with my husband. I end up negotiating with my 7-year-old. I end up going, okay, whatever. Sure, that'll be the way that it is. And I forget my own voice. And so when I know those things, right, and it doesn't feel good. And for me, those are the things that don't feel good. I don't like to experience those things. But they're the telltale signs that something I value is missing. Something I value is being ignored. And so I would posit to you, what are you ignoring, avoiding, putting off What are you valuing that you are not fulfilling the need for having that in your life? The purpose of this, right? The purpose of this is to really have an experience of what we value. And so at the talk that I gave, we did an exercise. I picked 5 values and we broke the room up and we asked some questions around those values as an exploration, as a way to experience, yes, I gravitate toward this thing. I value this in my life. I like the way this feels. And when we know that, when we know what we like, it's easier to find what we don't like. And it's necessary to know what we don't like in an effort to protect. Okay, I don't like saying no. I also don't like being spread too thin that I lose my think time. My think time is really important to me. So those sound like they might compete. Okay. Yes, I really want to support other people. Yes, I want to be there. Yes, I want to show up. Yes, 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 yes. And at the same time, yes, I want to think. Yes, I must take the time. Yes, that's what fuels my excitement and my energy. Kind of at odds, eh? Because when you say no to something, you're saying yes to something else. And when you're saying yes to things, you're saying no to something else. And so reconciling those competing values that make up who we are individually, start to manifest and show in other ways. They can show as resentment. They can show as burnout. They can show as irritable. They can show as nervous Nellies, or even Eeyore, right? From Winnie the Pooh, where he's resigned. We've resigned to being a certain way because it's just the way that it is. Well, I'm thinking about this, right? And I'm preparing for this program and I'm doing all of this research for this talk, Bring Your Values to Life. And I realize that I've got these competing values. And how do I reconcile that? And can I reconcile that? Because sometimes we can't. Sometimes we can't make it all good. And what I realized amidst all of that is that we have this, we have this capacity to change what we value based on situation. The situation we're in, the people we're around, the things we're trying to accomplish, the way we interact with ourselves and others, different weights in different places. And what that means to us, right, is that from the inside, oh my gosh, I've got this competing value. Say yes to as much as I can, or say yes to think time, and something gets lost. Something must be given up. When in reality, is it really truly a giving up, or is that a mindset? Being able to choose, okay, so this time, this space, this period, I'm going to say yes more to one than the other. Maybe it's something that, you know me, if you're going to throw a party, I really want to be there. If I see an opportunity to throw a party and invite people to come and have a really good conversation with me, I want to be there. I want to make that happen. Well, right? You listen to this show enough. We do this twice a week. We're having a party. You're at this party. I'm at this party. Whoever's on with me at the times that they're on, we're having a party. And we are keeping this conversation going, and that's what it's about. So I go for the periods of time, like I alluded to just a few minutes ago, of sometimes I will say yes to a lot of things and my schedule will be full and I have less think time. And sometimes I will say no to those other things because I am saying yes to the think time, because it is the time. It's the time to whatever I'm doing, prepare for an event, create a new talk, develop materials, be at a client offsite, prepare for a roundtable, and then being able to be fully present in that conversation. So sometimes, right, if we like schedules and we like to-do lists and everybody is ruled by their schedule, me included, I'm still trying to figure that one out. I'm not particularly fond of it, but I know some people are, okay? So whether you're in my camp or the other camp, we like or we just understand that we have to like, okay? That's where we get to think about some other things. We get to think about, so when do we value this and what is the situation we value it in? Do we think we're adding value, and because we're able to add value and see a result or move something forward and it keeps our momentum going, that's where we want to put our energy instead of something else? Kind of a cool self-reflection piece. What am I doing? How does it make me feel? And how do I like the results not of the feeling. How do I like the results of the interaction? Am I meeting the right people for my business? Am I making the right connection to get that next job I want? Did I learn something new that I can apply in my role every single time I answer the telephone? Do I have something new that I can talk about when people come visit me? When somebody is having a problem, do I like to share resources? Or do I like to just share resources because I like to share resources, right? Whatever our driver is, however we answer those questions, good reflection questions. And in fact, part of think time for companies, and I do this for Red Direction too, there's two aspects of the think time. There's the my think time, and there's the Red Direction think time. Because they're so closely intertwined, it also becomes family think time. So what's going on in my family, what's going on in my work, what's going on in my community, right? With Girl Scouts or the Colorado Women's Education Foundation or the Association of Software Professionals, and what's going on with me. Because without me, all those things would still exist, but without me being part of the equation means I don't know how to fully show up there. And I am making an effort, disciplining myself to think about, how do I feel? How does it make me feel? What does it look like? If the results are down the road, how do I know that I'm contributing in a way that those results are going to show up? And what happens if they don't? I shared a story in this talk about a time where values turned out to lead down a path of internal implosion. A company that I started with a co-founder imploded. And there were hurt feelings. There was a lost relationship. There was a loss. A decent chunk of money from each of us was lost as well. It's from that particular experience that everything negative that has happened before in business and the things that happened since, I can see elements of value coming into play. Of course, I'm talking about me here. So as you're listening to this, think about this from your perspective. Okay. So when we sat down and we said we had this great big idea, we both loved the idea. We loved it so much. We jumped right in. Everything that we did added momentum. And we looked at the positive. And when we found things that we did not agree on, when we found things that there might be a fork in the road, we ignored them. We put them aside. We pretended they didn't exist, or we just tabled them. And I'm using that in quotes, tabled them. You know it as well as I do. Some things that are tabled never get untabled. Some things that are tabled are actually pushed to the back of the closet, pushed underneath the rug, and that lump of that stuff gets so big there's no room in the closet, and you're walking over this lump and can't figure out why you're tripping all the time. I think that's an interesting thing to consider. And because we avoided that, right? Looking back after it happened and after it was over, and now that it's been several years, I have, hindsight being 2020, a different way to interpret what happened. Of course, I kept learning. Of course, I kept my curiosity on. Of course, I worked through that grieving process and that pain and decided what I was going to do with it. And this is what I did with it. I looked back and I was like, hey, you know what? We did not look at the risk from the perspective of our values. We only looked at what was possible. We only looked at what was ideal. We only looked at what we wanted. And in doing so, we left great big holes that we tripped up and tripped in along the way until we were so hurt and we were so resentful and we were so surprised and we were so ignorant in a lot of ways of each other's needs because we never talked about them, that everything, and that was the end of that. And I think about that, and I'm thinking about this in terms of bringing values to life because there are two sides to every coin. There is the possibility, and then there is the risk. There is what we can go for, what gets us excited, and then there is at what cost. What else do we need to be aware of within ourselves that we are lacking in our teams, that we're lacking in our companies, that we are lacking in resources, time, energy, whatever it might be, that could prevent us from getting where we're going and cause us to take more than just a step or two back, but potentially end what we value and what we are trying to protect and create in terms of having something sustainable, in terms of having something that grows our businesses. the role we have in our business, our career, the impact we want to make in this world, the way we learn, what we choose to be responsible for, all of those things. Okay, so I've talked a little bit about this, and I think it's a good time to stop and share some of the research that I found, because of course, y'all know I talk about values, and we don't typically talk about the negative side of avoiding our values or setting things aside that are important to us for the potential betterment of the greater good, when in fact, it has unintended consequences because it's never been said. What is left to assumption will be assumed, and we can't guarantee that it's being perceived or interpreted or received in such a way that they know exactly what's going on in our brains. And if we don't know that, there's no way we can know that about the people around us. So all of you with teams around you, have you ever had a conversation? Have you ever had that bigger conversation? What do you really value about the work that we do here? What do you really value in your personal life? How are you able to use that and leverage that in your work here? Tricky. We're going to come back to that, right? Bigger conversations, because it's when we understand our own values and we have those conversations, which can sometimes be scary, we realize what people want, we realize what we want, and it helps inform us around the decisions that we must be making. What other things do we want to include besides our company values that we all think we have shared meaning around? Do we actually have shared meaning? And having those conversations with the people around us will tell us, will inform us. Do we have the shared meaning that we want? Do we have the perspective and the diverse opinions and the ways that we can work together more effectively? All right, this research. There are two pieces of research that I settled in on and I was using. The first is this concept of leadership style. And this is about stuff we hear about, we get the idea of, so I'm going to breeze over parts of it, right? Like lizard brain. We all have a lizard brain. And our lizard brain, what is it doing? It's telling us all the time and assessing all the time, constantly. Are we safe? Are we threatened? Are we safe? Are we threatened? And based off of whether we think we're safe or not, depends on what happens next. It depends on whether we act or react and use a conscious mind or an unconscious mind. When the lizard brain says, holy cow, there's danger here, we automatically revert to something that we do. We freeze, we run, we fight, right? Fight, flight, freeze. When we look back, we reflect, how do we react automatically when we feel threatened? And remember, our threats are not dinosaurs or alligators or big birds or monsters from the sea or aliens, okay? It's traffic. It's too little time. It's a change in the marketplace. Something happened to one of our suppliers. Something happened to part of our distribution channel. Something happened here. Something happened there. And our business is going to be interrupted. Those are the types of things that can turn on and put our body into this automatic place of reaction. At this step, we know if we're threatened, and when we're threatened, we know what we do. And this is all from self-reflection. It allows us to create some more knowledge around, how are we in these situations? How are we when we feel like somebody's picking a fight with us? How are we when somebody else is grouchy and we're also in a bad mood? Are we going to react with grouchy? Are we going to be able to hold our tongue, right? Conscious, unconscious, potentially. Maybe it's the other way around. Maybe it's conscious, unconscious, depending on who you are and your experiences. And there are a lot of things that go into this conscious, unconscious mind. It's our feeling, it's our emotion, it's the way we think, and it's our ability to self-regulate. Okay, so this concept of that, it has a name. It's a neuroscientist, Evian Gordon, and I'll make sure and put the link to some articles and information about him that talk about this. And this concept, thought process that we go through at each level gives us, I don't want to say control, but I do want to say control, because when we control, it makes an assumption that we know everything. So I'm saying in control of ourselves. We know as much as we know about ourselves. We can't necessarily know or deal or handle with what's coming out from behind us, but we can come forward. We can take a look and take ownership and be responsible for ourselves in this situation. And so when we know the first two things, are we threatened or are we not? And when we're threatened, how do we show up? And when we're not threatened, how do we show up? Are we reacting or are we responding? Right? Those are things that you hear us talk about on the Voice of Bold Business Radio. They're things that we practice and we talk through and we look through situations when we are doing consulting with teams. Okay. The other piece, the skills, are something that we must build. And absolutely no trainer, no mentor, no coach can make you learn those. Experience might. It depends on how we integrate experience into what we do. So those four things, emotion, feeling, thought, and self-regulation, these are skills. And some people would be like, it's kind of innate. Well, sure, it's innate in all of us. Whether we choose to use them, whether we choose to develop them, whether we choose to spend the extra little bit of time to go deeper into what happens when we use those, or what would we like to happen with our conscious, unconscious response, and which of these other levels, thought process, emotion, thinking, and self-regulation, can we pull into the situation right now to make the most of it? And make the most of it maybe sounds like settling. But you know what I like about it is that when we're making the most of it, it doesn't matter if it's a good situation or a bad situation, there's always room for more. And we're the element of more. How are we showing up? What are the things that we do that we can take responsibility for in the situation that we're in? Because anytime we're in a situation with more than ourselves, we're half responsible. And then I would say one more step. We are 100% responsible for showing up. Thank you, Marilyn Shannon, because she was the first person who put that on my radar, is that everybody who's involved in a situation is equally responsible for the outcome. It is not divvied up in any way. And I'm thinking about the self in that too, right? Sometimes we deal with things, we have unconscious responses, we do all this stuff, and it's just us. Same thing. We're the one in there. We are responsible for 100% of the output by ourselves, as well as when we're interacting with other people. Okay, so this concept that he's thought about and brought forward, this threat or safety, this conscious, unconscious, so react or respond, and then the skills that we can use, thought, self-regulation, emotion, and feeling, to bring in are one style of looking. This is the one that we have been experiencing in some form or fashion for many years now. I'd say over a decade. I was learning in some capacity neuroscience as it was first coming out. This is where we're at. Behavior. What causes us to behave? How do we behave in these certain situations? How do others behave in specific situations? All of that is information to allow us to have checkpoints of knowledge, checkpoints of how a situation is going, bringing in that information to use later. So we've got that concept, all of those pieces in some form. In this model, we've heard here or there and everywhere over the years in any type of leadership and personal development that we do. Now there's some new research, and many of you in this newer research might go, yeah, of course it's not that new. And no, it's not that new. How we're integrating it into behavior and action, how we're integrating it into life and into business is new. So we already knew we had a head, right? And this concept of leadership and results is, how are we using our head and how are we solving problems and how are we keeping emotion out to be the most efficient possible? Squeezing the most. The thing is, that works to an extent, but then, goes back to that beginning of stuff. Part of us doesn't get fulfilled. Part of us sees the purpose, follows that direction, maybe even makes that the path. And at all costs, that's what's going to happen because that's what's been valued as important. But a piece of us dies inside. We're not nurtured. Our motivation wanes. We don't understand this thing without any element of emotion and feeling involved in it. So those high-level executive functions that came from the first one in business in a lot of ways have been stripped out. And now they're coming back in and they're showing up a lot of different ways. One of which is mission-driven companies. Another is heart-centered leadership. So we've got these ideas that are in place. When we do this, we lead differently. When we do this, we can still see the same results as being super efficient, super by the book, super tweaking these these equations to get the most of what we're doing and the most of our people. Now we're changing the equation. I mean, that's the thing with the neuroscience that we have today. We're changing the equation, and the equation is changing for more than the fact that we don't like it, so we're putting our foot down. Well, that's part of it, totally part of it. But the thing is, companies are going to be companies, and business is going to be done whether or not we participate or not. So when we feel squished and we feel like pieces of us are dying inside, we can take ownership of that and we can change it. We can use 3 brains instead of 1. 3 brains instead of 1. And this is the second model that I found that I not only enjoy, it's something that I'm so glad that there's research going on right now. So glad that there is research going on right now and measurements that we can now take. The more that we study the body, the more that we study the brain, the more that we study the relationship with the different systems within our body and how we interact with each other, without even being in the same room, right? I mean, think back to the time you're thinking or feeling, you're having this memory, okay, which is all senses, this memory of somebody that you know and you haven't talked to in a long time. And what happens? They call you. That is a connection. And they're starting to measure things like that. For our conversation today, though, we're going to start with the methodology behind it. And I'm going to totally butcher these names, but I am going to link to some of the research that I also have used. And it's Grant Susalu and Marvin Oka. They are part of the company MBIT International. And they are looking at new ways to measure what's happening in all parts of our body and the interaction between all parts of our body, and turning that into something that we can use for ourselves, for our personal development. And of course, anything that we can use for our personal development has a place and a space and the opportunity to be used for our organization as well. So these 3 brains. We've got our head brain. That's what we're all used to hearing about. This new thing that we've always known we had, but we didn't know where it fit into business, and people are still trying to figure that out today, is our heart brain. Our heart does not need our brain to function. Our heart needs our brain to run the other organs so our heart can keep going. Pretty big difference. Now, then there's a 3rd brain, and it's our gut. Our gut. There are so many microorganisms and biomes and ecosystems that are in there that when our gut is out of balance, our ability to assess situations changes. It does. It changes. I mean, have you ever heard of, and one of the things in this research that I really liked is that the head brain is all about creativity, according to what the studies that they're finding and the information that they're putting together. The heart brain is compassion, which, by the way, we all know we need more in business. You hear me talk about love in business once in a while. Love is a pretty bold word to say when we're talking about compassion, because we forget all of the elements of compassion, love being one of them. And the 3rd, our gut brain or enteric brain, is where we get our courage. I mean, think of the phrase gutsy. That person is gutsy, right? They are able to assess different information with the gut and make a decision. We're able to assess information with our heart from a place of compassion and make a decision. We are able to use logic and the space for looking for patterns, seeing analysis, making connections. That comes from our head brain. So we've got this element of these 3 brains. And if we think about that for a minute, these 3 brains, all of us know what the head brain looks like without the other 2. We have potentially a stereotype of that. Again, we also have a stereotype of people who only use heart, who only are mission-driven, who only work with emotions and relational connection, right? We also know people who are, the label, the stereotype is adrenaline junkie. People who love to go after something. They love the conquering. They love whatever they love about that. And that's also where our self-preservation comes in. Our lizard brain is part of that. One of the oldest elements of the brain is our lizard brain is connected with our gut. All right. And as I'm reading this and I'm doing this research, and their research led me to some more questions, which allowed me to do some more research. And turns out value fits so well into this. Whether we're talking about personal value in our experience, we can add dimension and perspective from our own internal resources which allow us to be part of a bigger conversation. So when we know ourselves, it is important to me to have different perspectives and learn from other people. For example, when I'm in those conversations that allow me to do that, right? That's my head brain, or the head brain in this scenario. The heart brain is because I really get to better understand the people around me. I get to understand what motivates them, what they look forward to, what scares them. And then my gut brain gets to say, now I know how to be safe or create safety. Now I know how to make somebody else feel safe or create safety for them. So it changes the whole ballgame of what we think of about leading and effective leading, because it's more than one math equation. It's actually three brains working together. And if you think about it, we always hear, go get a coach, go get a mentor, talk to your board, have trusted people that will tell you the truth. And what if we were able to stop and take a look at what was important to us and look at things through those three lenses internally? We now have another perspective of a place we're really good at. Some of us default to gut, heart, or head brain leadership. We are strong in one. So when we proactively look at ways to connect our values and look from all three perspectives, we have more awareness and context from ourselves. And the bigger awareness in this context that we have of how we're reacting, why we're reacting, what drives our motivation, our being scared, our overall behavior, that allows us to hold a bigger space for people around us too, in every walk of life. And so here, bringing our value to life, because when we know what we value, we can speak up for that. This is a skill that some of us might lack, speaking up and using our voice, being willing to step out on a limb when everybody agrees except for you. Can you step up? Use that gut to combined with your heart and your brain to go, hey, we're missing something here. And this is, where does this fit in? Because I don't see it. And I'd like to know more and make sure we're thinking about that too. And we can do that from every brain center. So we're talking about this concept of how we react, okay? So our bodies have innate wisdom to keep us safe, to know that when we felt unsafe, what we did to eventually feel safe, right? The conscious, unconscious. And we have these skills that we can learn to leverage and work with our own internal formula, very linear thinking. Now we're talking about a different kind of thinking, which is more perspective oriented, which is, holy cow, we don't have one brain that functions our whole body. We have three. We have three different places in our body that fully integrate to how we react, how we show up, do we feel safe, and can we connect to others effectively and make them feel safe too? It's kind of a big deal. And the reason it's a big deal is because when we look at business initiatives, okay, so we're leaders in a company, we're practicing our own reflection, getting to know ourselves more, and then what? And then what? Now we have to bring that to the role that we find ourselves in. And this is the voice of bold business radio business. So everything we talk about here can be applied everywhere else. From at this moment, we're going to talk about business things, which is, maybe I want to hire new workers. Maybe I want to expand into a new market. Maybe I want to add a new product. These are three things that happen all the time. Okay. So what is driving that? Maybe I want to. This would be good for business because might be another way to say that. When we're doing business planning and looking at the next 18 months and then 3 years and 5 years out, this is what we need to do. This is where we need to go. This is what the opportunities are. External checkpoints. Internally, do we have the resource in the organization? Do we have the resources to do this? How do we make sure we keep up the level of service and quality that we're already giving, the values that we are telling our customers, the expectations that we have set, the promises that we have made? That integrity of that, and then to expand, to do more. Wow. It's a big deal. And we do it every day. We just don't necessarily know it. So another thought would be, as far as this bigger conversation, what have you done that you're only using one part of your brain for? One of your three brains for? And what could you do to incorporate different parts of brain, the other brains? All right. And I'm trying to think of an example, an everyday example All right. This is kind of goes back to my concept of problem, no problem. Thank you, Ivana, for coming up with that phrase for me. Problem, no problem, right? We have problem solving skills and we use them. This has actually happened to me right today. Here I am. I'm at the office. I was getting ready for this talk, and some of the printing is being done by a print shop. Some of the printing is being done at the office. Nobody ordered paper. We're out of paper. Problem, no problem. Immediately, my brain goes, ooh, this is what we've done before. Go get the paper. That's my, let's just get this problem solved and I can be safe again. Another part of me is saying, but I've got to work in to go to this meeting. If I go get the paper or I have somebody else go get the paper, it's going to affect the start time of this meeting. Now what do we do? And the other part of me is like, do we really need paper? Can't we just send the file out and have somebody else do it for us? All of those are coming from inside of me. 3 different brains, 3 different perspectives. What ended up happening was, out of everybody that was available, I was the one that was going to be closest to a store at some point. And so I got the paper while I was out, and we'll take care of it for next time that we don't run low, right? So we have this, unexpected thing. Here's how we're going to handle it. We're going to come together. Here I am thinking, using 3 parts of my brain, how are we going to make this happen? A decision made, problem solved, and off we went. And everything worked out. In fact, everything worked out. But it's even in those small things, like, we just ran out of paper now, what do we do? Or we showed up at a business meeting and we remembered everything but the presentation we were going to give, right? What are we going to do about that? Think about questions like that happen just every day. Oh my gosh, I double booked something in my calendar, or whoever manages my calendar double booked me, or there are 2 events that need to happen at the same time. How do we get representation at both? All of those things are things that happen every day that we face, that we're making decisions about. And those are the perfect things to have this bigger conversation about, to have a self-reflection and to talk to others about. Here's what I did. Here's how I handled it. Do you see me using all 3 brains and be there for somebody else? How did you use your head brain, your heart brain, and your gut brain to solve a problem recently that you had? Or let's talk through a problem, and can we together figure out, was one dominant? Were they equal? Were they at least present? Those are the types of things that we can do to have this bigger conversation. This concept about value, because when we recognize what we have available to us and we figure out how to leverage it, how cool is it that then we can apply what motivates us, what adds value to us, and use it. And by the way, those problems are like little sticking points that I just described. This could work for big things too. Like I was talking about in the conversation earlier about one of the businesses that I started that imploded, right? And it had big losses on many levels. Had I known, first of all, right? So I'm going to own my responsibility, and that I had no concept that there was unmet needs anywhere in my co-founder of that. Okay, had no concept. So that's on me. I get that. And then when I realized that there was a problem, I would start to ask the questions, but I realized a little too late, and their resentment had already set in. Frustration, resignation that this was the way that it was going to be, that person did not feel safe. And when they did not feel safe, they were an automatic response. So it didn't matter how I was trying to create safety. That person wasn't able to meet me there. And of course, after a while, I started feeling unsafe. I started feeling like, I'm dreading this meeting this morning. I don't want to talk to this person this afternoon. Do I really have to see them today? I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to say, because I know they're going to be like, and you could fill in the blank with whatever you want. Anytime that's the case, we feel defensive. And by the way, I bet that's how the other person felt before I realized what was happening and didn't know about it, didn't think about it. We both put it aside, and we'd seemed to make an agreement, and we were able to put it aside differently and compartmentalize it differently. And it caused a problem. So when we were talking about value, this could be at home, this could be at work, this could be with our best friend, this could be with a colleague, it could be with a neighbor. It's a whole other conversation to have, right? Being able to work with neighbors, especially when they have different values, and we're just kind of doing things and we're surprised, and we've got to live next to each other, but we don't like what's going on. It's all about the bigger conversation. And my question to you is, how do we bring our values to life to facilitate that bigger conversation? And that's what I'd like to leave with today. That's what I'd like to consider when we're talking about what's going on at Red Direction, and we're talking about the programs that are offered. This is just one element of what we are attempting to do, attempting to achieve, and actually achieving for those who are ready to step up, step in, and use multiple facets of thinking, use multiple facets of emotion, use multiple facets of risk tolerance to have that bigger conversation. And so if you want to find out more about that, right? If you want to find out more, we have a program that we do twice a year. We value into business growth. And our next one will be in October, Friday, October 19th. The thing too is there's another way. That's a long ways away. It's like 4 months away. So keep listening to this program, because the Voice of Bold Business Radio is what we're using to have that bigger conversation, to expand, to recognize that we're all facing problems, that we're all facing new situations, that we're all working on ourselves, and that we're all trying to show up to allow our teams, our families, our friends, our whomever, everybody to show up also. And that interplay is something that we're all working with, and we all have our own unique way of putting it together. But that's why we're here at the Voice of Bold Business Radio. It's a resource to have interesting conversations, to spark creativity, to recognize that emotion has a place at the table, and to recognize that when we don't deal with risk, or we don't assess and understand what our risk is, whether that's small, we're going to go hungry because we forgot to order lunch for the meeting, or whether that's big, we just really messed up and we lost a multi-million-dollar contract because it turned into a we said, they said. Whatever level we're at, this has a place and can be used right away, because we know what makes us feel good and we know what doesn't. And so if somebody else, if they're showing the signs of not feeling good, of recognizing that some value that they have isn't being met, can we step up and step in and use our value? Use what we recognize in the way that our brains work and the way that we're automatically wired to connect with them. And that's value-based leadership, that's value-based decision-making, and that's using our values in everyday life. All right, so this is program 161. Program notes for this show are at voiceofboldbusiness.com/P161. That is voiceofboldbusiness.com/P for program 161. You can also search Bring Values to Life. I want to share with you one more thing, one more little tidbit. I'm proud of me for having the courage to make this show and to figure out how to make it work for you, the audience. And that requires you participating so that we can continue to make sure we're talking about the things that you want to talk about. This is a conversation. This is not one-sided. This is a conversation across multiple forms of media. So send us an email, vbbradio@reddirection.com. Use hashtag VBBradio. Tag me, Jess Dewell, on social media. We will find what you're talking about. We would love to have your voice and enjoy having your voice because of the additional perspective, the experience that you have, which is unique to you, and how you're adding to this conversation of what it means to be a leader today. So that's part one. Part two of the little bit of extra is this program is going to be useful to somebody else. So rate what you're listening to today, add a comment, send the link to a friend, a colleague, somebody that you know that's struggling, and let them peruse through the program list. We have 161 programs. There is something out there for many of the problems that we're facing today. And if it's not a direct answer, it is an indirect answer that we can spark our creativity, that we can spark our thinking, that we can spark the willingness to look at something different, a little bit of guts in there. I'm proud of you for listening. I'm proud of you for taking part, because it takes a lot to go, I still have more to learn. It takes a lot to say, I will make time to invest in myself, the time of this podcast, this radio show, this live stream that we're doing on the Voice of Bold Business Radio. This is for you, and thank you for being here. So, even if you continue to listen silently, make sure you subscribe to the Voice of Bold Business Radio over on YouTube and on your favorite listening platform like iHeartRadio, Stitcher, iTunes, and several more that you can find listed at the website. Keep this conversation going. Build it within yourself and your teams. Have that bigger conversation. Take the time to bring your values to life.
Subscribe at thevoiceofboldbusiness.com and get more information, program notes, and past episodes. Bold leaders approach each situation and focus on action to achieve a higher level of leadership. Jessica Dewell, your business advocate, is the host of the Voice of Bold Business Radio. Thank you for joining us.